Christmas nightmare. I was just 10 when I moved to my dad's place. It was a new town, and I didn't know anyone except this family my dad was friends with. They were a single mom with 3 kids. Luckily, there was a girl a couple years older than me. She was 12 when we met. Over the next couple of years, we got to know each other a bit. We weren't close, but ended up having the same friends. I remember one night my friend Rob was hanging out with her and her younger brother. They were alone in the house because their mom was at work. Their mom had been helping this lady through her job. She got to know her pretty well. It's how she found out the lady had a sister who'd been in a mental institution. She was just recently released. That night Rob was over, there was a knock at the door. My friend thought it was just their mom. She has this certain way of knocking when she comes in. So he answered without thinking. Rob wasn't supposed to be there, so he took off through the window to his house down the road. Never thought twice about it. But it wasn't their mom at the door. It was the sister of the lady their mom had been helping. Somehow she'd figured out where they lived and their mom's work schedule from talking to her sister. She came inside. This is where the details get fuzzy. I'm glad I don't know more. My friend's younger brother managed to get away to the neighbor's house and call the police. But Delaney, she brutally murdered my friend. Just a week before Christmas, the police found her decapitated naked body in the bathtub. They even had to search through the Christmas presents to find her head. I wasn't allowed to go to the funeral. The whole town was in shock. How could something so horrific happen in our quiet community? It was like a scene from a nightmare come to life. I kept thinking about how it could have been me there that night. For months after, I couldn't sleep without the lights on. Every creak in the house made me jump. I'd wake up in cold sweats imagining that woman standing over my bed. The fear was paralyzing. They caught Delaney, of course, but knowing she was locked up didn't ease the terror. It opened my eyes to the evil that can exist in the world, as it says in the Quran, and we will surely test you with something of fear and hunger and a loss of wealth and lives and fruits. But give good tidings to the patient. Sometimes I still think about my friend, about the life she never got to live, the milestones she missed. In those moments, I try to remember another teaching. Allah does not burden a soul beyond that it can bear. But some days that's little comfort in the face of such senseless tragedy. The grandmother's guardian angel. It was a chilly winter evening about 15 years ago. My wife's grandmother had just finished her volunteer shift at the local library. The sun had already set, casting long shadows across the quiet streets. She declined a ride home from a fellow volunteer. She needed the exercise, she told herself, but deep down she knew it was more than that. It was about reclaiming her independence after losing her husband a year ago. The walk home was about a mile through a lightly wooded area in South Texas. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, once said, "Allah is with those who patiently persevere," and persevere she did, step by step through the growing darkness. Halfway home, she noticed someone behind her. Dad! At first she thought nothing of it, but as the footsteps grew closer, her heart began to race. She quickened her pace, her arthritic knees protesting with each step. The stranger matched her speed, staying just behind her. She could feel his presence like a shadow looming over her. Her home was in sight now. The porch light a beacon of safety in the gathering gloom. Just 150 yards to go. She prayed silently for protection, remembering the verse in Allah is the best of protectors. 100 yards. She could hear his labored breathing now, feel the heat of it on the back of her neck. Her fingers closed around the cold metal in her purse. 50 yards. A strong hand gripped her shoulder. "Okay, don't turn around and hand over your purse, or I'll cut you." Time seemed to stand still. In that moment, she made a choice. With surprising agility for her age, she stepped forward and spun around. The .38 revolver was steady in her hand as she squeezed the trigger. The sound was deafening in the quiet night. The man clutched at his neck, eyes wide with shock as he crumpled to the ground. She stood there, trembling, adrenaline coursing through her veins as sirens wailed in the distance. In the years that followed, she often reflected on that night. The man spent 5 years in a prison hospital before succumbing to complications. She lived to a ripe old age, passing peacefully last year. But to her dying day, she lamented pulling the trigger too soon. "I should have given him a chance to repent," she'd say. Allah is oft forgiving, most merciful. It was a stark reminder that even in our darkest moments we have choices. and those choices can haunt us long after the danger is past. The white SUV, I was just a kid, maybe 8 or 9 years old. My sister was 7 years older and often babysat me when our parents went out. She had a smoking habit back then. Her parents made her smoke outside, of course. Being the annoying little brother, I'd always follow her out to play around and bug her. One evening, as we stood in the driveway, I noticed my sister tense up. She was staring down the road. There at the end of our driveway sat a white SUV, just sitting there in the road. It had a bike rack on top, and the darkest tinted windows I'd ever seen. You couldn't make out anything inside. We watched as it idled there until my sister finished her cigarette and went back in. Then it slowly drove to the end of the road and parked in the church lot, waiting. This bizarre routine continued each time she went out for a smoke. My brave sister tried to ignore it, but the next day, while our parents were out again, it showed up once more. Sitting, watching, I peered out the front window when I didn't go outside. The SUV just sat there motionless, staring at my sister. She told our father. He was a sheriff's deputy and called the police to file a complaint. They came and looked around, but the SUV was long gone. Months passed with no sign of it. We started to relax and forget. Then one day, about 9 months after it first appeared, it was back. And it kept coming back regularly after that. Another evening, we were home alone as usual. My sister had had enough. She told me to stay in the carport while she confronted them. I watched nervously as she marched halfway down the driveway. Suddenly she froze. Later she told us I felt utter terror, like I knew if I went any further I was dead. She turned and hurried back inside, shaking. Finally, one night our family car was in the shop. We were all stuck at home. My sister went out for a smoke, and I tagged along. The SUV appeared right on cue. She told me to run inside and get Dad. I sprinted and yelling for him. He grabbed his gun and strode purposefully down the driveway. The SUV floored it and peeled out onto the highway. Dad noted the details. Make, model, year. But chillingly, the license plate was covered in duct tape. We never saw that white SUV again. But sometimes on quiet nights, I still find myself peering out windows, searching for those black, tinted windows staring back at me from the shadows. I seek refuge in prayer, remembering the Quranic verse, "And Allah is the best of guardians, and He is the most merciful of those who show mercy." But a part of me will always wonder who was in that SUV, and why they were watching us. The man in the doorway? I was just a little boy of 4 or 5 when my parents split up. My mom and I moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment on the ground floor. Though I had my own room, I always preferred sleeping in her bed. It was comforting to be close to her, especially during those uncertain times. One hot summer night, we went to bed as usual. Mom's window was open behind the headboard, letting in a slight breeze. I drifted off to sleep, feeling safe and secure. In the middle of the night, I suddenly woke up. As I sat up in bed, I noticed our cat sitting in the open doorway. This was odd, since he normally slept curled up with us. I watched as he walked into my bedroom across the hall and let out a soft meow. I turned to wake my mom, feeling a bit uneasy. It only took a few seconds to rouse her, but when we looked back at the doorway, my blood ran cold. There was a man standing there, a stranger, but in our home, in the dead of night. Time seemed to stand still as panic gripped me. Then in one fluid motion, my mother scooped me up and literally threw me out the open window. She quickly followed as we tumbled onto the grass outside. We started screaming for help at the top of our lungs. The night air carried our cries, and soon lights were flicking on in neighboring apartments. Someone called the police. When the officers arrived, they found no signs of forced entry. Our front door was unlocked, which they said the intruder likely used to exit. But my mom swore she had locked and chained it before bed. The whole ordeal left us shaken. I had trouble sleeping for weeks, plagued by nightmares. Mom was on edge constantly, checking locks and peering out windows. About a week later, she was cleaning the kitchen when she opened the water heater closet. Inside, she found a notebook filled with strange writings and drawings. There were also some gloves and gum wrappers. We called the police again, but all they could do was speculate. It seemed the man had been hiding in our home, waiting for us to fall asleep. The thought made my skin crawl. That experience taught me the importance of being vigilant and trusting one's instincts. As the Quran says, Allah does not burden a soul beyond that it can bear. Though terrifying, we made it through that night by the grace of God. Still to this day, I'm haunted by the image of that shadowy figure in the doorway. It was a harsh reminder that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places, even in the sanctity of one's own home. The basement cackle. I never thought doing laundry could be so terrifying. It was just another ordinary day in my life. I headed down to the basement to tackle the pile of dirty clothes that had been accumulating all week. The laundry room was separated from the rest of the basement by a wall and a door. To get back upstairs, I had to exit the laundry room and walk through the other part of the basement. As I was loading the washing machine, I heard a pop. The light in the main part of the basement had blown out. It was the only light on that side, leaving it pitch black. I tried to push away the creeping sense of unease. There was nothing to be afraid of. It was just a burnt-out bulb. I finished loading the laundry, dreading the walk through the dark basement. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "Allah is with those who have patience." I repeated this to myself, trying to calm my nerves. Finally, I couldn't delay any longer. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the laundry room. The darkness seemed to press in on me from all sides. I could barely make out the vague shapes of boxes and old furniture. My heart was pounding as I made my way carefully across the basement. The silence was deafening, broken only by my footsteps and ragged breathing. I was halfway across when I heard it. A loud cackle right behind me. It sounded like a witch's laugh, but deeper and hoarser, as if the witch had been smoking for 50 years. It was crystal clear, as if someone was standing right next to me. Ice flooded my veins. For a split second, I was frozen in terror. Then survival instinct kicked in. I bolted for the stairs, not daring to look back. I took the steps 2 at a time, my legs burning. I slammed the basement door behind me and leaned against it, gasping for air. My whole body was shaking. I waited anxiously for my father to get home before going back down to change the light bulb. To this day, I've never heard that bone-chilling cackle again. I haven't told a single person in the house about what happened. Sometimes late at night, I still think I hear echoes of that laugh. The Quran says, "And we will surely test you with something of fear and hunger." Perhaps this was my test of fear. But whenever I have to do laundry now, I make sure someone else is home first. The uninvited guest. I never thought I'd experience true terror in my own home. As a young English tutor in South Korea, I lived alone in a small one-room apartment. My days were filled with teaching, and my nights often spent watching movies to pass the time. One evening a few years ago, I was tutoring a high school boy named Junho. We lost track of time studying and realized the buses had stopped running. Junho lived far away and begged to stay the night. I hesitated, knowing it wasn't proper, but his pleading wore me down. I reluctantly agreed, letting him sleep on the floor while I took the bed. In the dead of night, I was jolted awake by Junho, shaking my shoulder. "I'm starving. Let's go get food," he insisted. I blinked in confusion, glancing at the clock. It was 2 a.m. "Go back to sleep," I mumbled. But Junho was oddly persistent, urging me to go to a 24-hour restaurant down the street. His nervous energy was unsettling. After several minutes of back and forth, I gave in, and we left the apartment. As soon as we stepped outside, Junho's demeanor changed completely. He turned to me with wide, fearful eyes. "I'm not actually hungry," he said in a shaky voice. "I woke up and looked under your bed. There's a man sleeping there." My blood ran cold as his words sank in. My mind raced through all the little oddities I'd noticed recently. Missing food, strange noises at night. Items moved slightly out of place. Trembling hands, I called the police. To my horror, they discovered a homeless man had been secretly living in my apartment for 2 months. He'd been sleeping under my bed each night, emerging only when I was gone. The realization made me feel violated in the worst way. I thought of all the nights I'd slept just inches above this intruder, completely unaware. How long had he been watching me? What were his intentions? The Quran teaches that our homes should be places of peace and security. But mine had become a nightmare. I was overwhelmed with gratitude for Junho's quick thinking. If not for him staying over, who knows how long this might have continued, or what could have happened. The police praised his bravery in getting me out of the apartment before revealing what he'd seen. As I gave my statement, I couldn't stop shaking. The sense of vulnerability was overwhelming. I'd never feel truly safe in my own space again. That night forever changed how I viewed the world. Evil can lurk in the most unexpected places, even right beneath our feet as we sleep. The desert highway. I was driving alone on a desolate shortcut from 29 Palms, California to Albuquerque, New Mexico. The sun was setting as I navigated the two-lane road through the barren high desert. My mind wandered to the Quranic verse about finding peace in solitude, but an uneasy feeling crept over me as darkness fell. The road wound up into a mountain range. At the summit I entered a narrow canyon with tall grass on both sides. My headlights illuminated something strange ahead. I slowed down, squinting to make out a red Pontiac Fiero stopped sideways across both lanes. An open suitcase with clothes scattered around it, two bodies face down on the asphalt. My heart started racing. Every instinct screamed that something was very wrong. It looked staged too perfect, like a setup. I stopped about 100 feet away, scanning for any movement. The hairs on my neck stood up as adrenaline surged through me. Reaching under the seat, I grabbed my 9mm pistol, my hands shaking as I chambered around. It felt solid in my grip, but I knew better than to step out. Getting out could mean death if this was an ambush. I studied the scene, looking for an escape route. There was a narrow path I could take past the man on the left, then swerve right behind the Fiero. It would be tight, but I could make it. I took a deep breath to steady myself, then dropped into first gear and punched the gas. My tires squealed as I accelerated toward the bodies. I swerved left then right, following my planned route. I barely missed clipping the Fiero as I sped past. My heart pounded in my ears as I floored it down the empty road ahead. After a few hundred feet, I slowed slightly and glanced in the rearview mirror. What I saw made my blood run cold. The two bodies had risen to their knees, and at least 20 figures emerged from the grass on both sides of the road. Pure terror gripped me. I stomped the gas pedal to the floor and didn't let up until I reached the highway on-ramp miles later. I said a prayer of thanks to Allah for delivering me from evil that night. To this day, I shudder to think what would have happened if I had stopped to help. The screams by the river's edge. It was supposed to be a relaxing night of fishing with friends. We had set up camp along the James River. Our fire crackled merrily, casting dancing shadows across our faces as we sat around swapping stories and sipping cold beers. The moon hung low and full in the sky, bathing the landscape in an eerie silver glow. Suddenly the chatter died. An unnatural silence fell over our group. I felt a chill run down my spine as every eye turned towards the opposite shore. There was a palpable sense that something was watching us from across the inky black water, an unseen presence that made my skin crawl. A few of the guys tried to break the tension with some forced laughter and macho posturing, but their bravado rang hollow in the oppressive quiet. I found myself straining my eyes, trying to pierce the darkness on the far bank, searching for any sign of movement. Without warning, a blood-curdling shriek shattered the silence. The inhuman sound reverberated across the water, freezing us all in place. My heart pounded in my chest as adrenaline flooded my system, fight-or-flight instincts screaming at me to run. The scream was like nothing I had ever heard before, a primal wail of agony that set every nerve on edge. It sounded almost human, and yet not quite, as if some poor soul was being flayed alive. The raw anguish in that cry chilled me to my very core. For several long moments we all sat motionless, eyes wide with fear fixed on the far shore. Then another scream ripped through the night, even more forceful than the first. Several of us leapt to our feet, sprinting towards the trucks parked nearby. Hands shaking, we retrieved whatever weapons we could find. Huddled together, we peered into the gloom, watching for any sign of movement across the river. The firelight glinted off the rocks along the shore. Shadows danced at the edge of our vision, playing tricks on our fear-addled minds. A third scream pierced the air, this time from our side of the river, just beyond the bushes, mere yards away. Panic exploded through our group. We fled, leaving most of our gear behind in our haste to escape. Piling into our vehicles, we heard one final cry from just beyond the tree line. Tires spinning, we sped away into the night, hearts racing, that inhuman wailing echoing in our ears. To this day, I still wake in a cold sweat, remembering those unearthly screams. A chilling reminder that there are things in this world beyond our understanding. As the Quran says, and he has created things of which you have no knowledge, the intruder. It was a Friday night, and excitement filled the air. My friend was picking me up for the hockey game in the city. We were running late, so I rushed out of the house without a second thought. The car ride was filled with laughter and anticipation. We were having such a great time that I hadn't even noticed I was missing something important. As we neared the arena, I suddenly realized my phone wasn't in my pocket. I frantically searched the car seat and floor, but came up empty-handed. A sinking feeling settled in my stomach. Had I forgotten it at home in my haste? Throughout the game, I couldn't shake the nagging worry. What if I had dropped it somewhere? During intermission, I borrowed my friend's phone and ducked into the restroom. With shaky fingers, I dialed my number, praying someone at home would answer. After 3 rings, I heard the line connect. But only silence greeted me on the other end. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing off the tiled walls. "I'm just checking if I left my phone at home." Still no response. Assuming it was my little brother playing a prank, I hung up with an exasperated sigh. It was late when I finally got home. The house was dark and quiet. My parents' car was gone, so I called to check where they were. "We went out for dinner and a concert at the park with your brother," my mom explained. "We left soon after you did for the game. We'll be home in about 30 minutes. As I hung up, a chill ran down my spine. If my family had been out all evening, then who had answered my phone earlier? Panic began to set in. My heart raced as I recalled the Prophet Muhammad's words. A strong believer is better and dearer, too, than a weak one, and there is good in both. Suddenly, I heard the back door creak open, then slam shut. Terror gripped me as I bolted out the front door to the neighbors. With trembling hands, I dialed emergency services. The police arrived quickly to sweep the house. They found the back door had been left unlocked, allowing an intruder easy access. Nothing was stolen, but the thought of a stranger lurking in our home while we slept was deeply unsettling. As I recited Ayat al-Kursi for protection, I realized how close we had come to true danger. That night taught me to always be vigilant and trust my instincts. Some fears are more than just imagination. The twisted neighbor. There was a time not long ago when a new family moved in next door. They seemed normal at first, but their son, he was different. At 19 years old, he had an unhealthy obsession with slasher films, always trying to get me to talk about my time in Vietnam. The gruesome details no sane person would want to hear. What really disturbed me was how he tormented stray animals. The boy was clearly unhinged. My daughter was only 7 then, sweet and innocent. This guy, he'd try to talk to her constantly. When she walked home from school, over the backyard fence as she played, one day he even called our house asking for her. That was the final straw. I stormed over there and lost it. Told him and his parents to stay away from my little girl. That's when things got strange. My daughter had always been imaginative. Monsters under the bed and all that. So when she started talking about something living in her closet, we didn't think much of it. She said it only came at night. Was too scared to tell us then, but gone by morning. Weeks went by. One evening, my wife and daughter were having a girls' night at Grandma's. I settled in for some late-night HBO. Must have dozed off on the couch. Around 2 a.m., the phone jolted me awake. It was the neighbor. Said they saw my lights on upstairs. Their son was missing. Wanted help searching. My blood ran cold. I'd been passed out downstairs. No lights were on. I hung up and ran for my shotgun. As I burst outside, I saw the sheriff pulling up next door. I yelled that someone was in my house. The upstairs lights were now on, shadow pacing in my daughter's room. When deputies entered, they found him, the neighbor boy, waiting in my little girl's bedroom. He'd made himself a cozy spot in her closet. Said he liked watching her sleep in the moonlight. My skin crawled, remembering the Prophet Muhammad's warning. Beware of entering upon women. This sicko had violated our home, our trust. I thanked Allah my family wasn't there that night. But the horror of what could have been haunts me still.